Well, happy Sunday, everybody. How you guys feeling today? Feeling good? Well, happy Mother's Day weekend to all of our moms out there. Can't we all just agree that moms make the world go round, don't they? And so we love all of our moms out there, biological moms, adoptive moms, bonus moms, step moms, those of you maybe missing your mom today or waiting to be a mom. We want you to know that we love you, and we're also really excited this morning. Want to say hi to all of you joining us online and at our Hocassin location. Can you guys give it up for everybody joining us this morning? We love you. We're excited that you're here, and I am so grateful to our lead pastor, Mark, and his wife, Susie, for this opportunity to be with you this weekend. I'm glad they get a chance to rest this weekend, and Susie is like a second mom to me. I know she'd probably prefer that I say older sister, but she has been such a big influence in my life, and so I'm grateful to be here as we continue our series, Mirrors, which is all about figuring out how we become who we want to be. But before we jump into that, I've got a couple of things I want to share with you about what's coming up here at The Journey. So what's coming up in the month of May? First thing is that we're going to be launching an in-person version of Plugged In starting next weekend. So if you have not yet taken the opportunity to join our J team, right now is the time to do that. And I always like to think of it like this: if moms make the world go round, our J teamers make the journey go round, all right? So if you are not yet part of our J team family, make sure that you join us at Plugged In. All of you who are part of our online J fam, you can continue to do Plugged In online as well. And then last but not least, it doesn't really feel like it this weekend, but summer is right around the corner, all right? Which means our summer semester of J Groups is kicking off the week of June 20th. And so I want you to be thinking right now about the type of group that you'd like to lead this summer. We always like to say around here, you do not have to be a spiritual ninja to lead a group. You just have to love God, love other people, have something that you're interested in that a few other people can do with you, all right? So now is the time. You can register a group online at yourjourney.tv. And so for this week, we're going to be talking about friendship, or at least on the surface, it's gonna seem like we're talking about friendship. And I know some of you guys are like, really? It's Mother's Day weekend. Now we're gonna talk about friendship, like 2 strikes, right? 3, and you're out. But I promise it's not gonna get too emotional. I will not shed any tears. And I do have to start by admitting that I do not really understand male friendships, okay? So this is kind of stereotypical, but a successful female friendship means that you get together, you hang out together. Sometimes you do shed a few tears together, you laugh together, and then you talk, and you talk. And then you talk some more about what you've already talked about. But I think a successful male friendship means that you watch UFC fights together and you barely talk to each other, but somehow you are still lifelong bros. That is what I understand about male friendships. And I know we are all wired differently, but no matter who we are, young, old, male, female, no matter what we believe about God or don't believe about God, I think that this friendship thing can be a struggle for many of us, mainly because it involves people, right? That's like the number one issue with any type of relationship. It involves people. And I think friendships don't really get easier as you get older. Actually, in many ways, they start to get harder. And so maybe for some of us, we are convinced that we don't really need other people when it comes to this friendship thing. Some of us are convinced that real friendship means just hitting the like button on somebody's social media post. Some of us are convinced that friendship is important, but we don't really know how to find some of those people or how to invest some more time in those relationships. But I think all of us, no matter who we are, no matter our background, could agree that we all want to get the most out of life. We all want to be the best version of ourselves. Some of us are asking, how do I become more successful? Or how do I get what I want? Or how can I just be happy? And the answer to all of those questions doesn't just have to do with us. The tough thing is the answer to those questions, to becoming who we ultimately want to be, involves other people. And so today, the story that we're going to be looking at is from Luke, which is one of the biographies of Jesus's life. And so at this point in Jesus's public ministry, he had started healing, he was performing miracles, he had been starting to get a lot of attention. Now, some of that attention was good, and some of it, as we'll see, was not so good. We're going to pick up this story here. This is Luke chapter 5, verse 17. One day while Jesus was teaching, some Pharisees and teachers of religious law were sitting nearby. It seemed that these men showed up from every village in all of Galilee and Judea, as well as from Jerusalem, and the Lord's healing power was strongly with Jesus. So we're going to see that there are quite a few different characters in this story. And one of the first characters are the Pharisees. I always like to think of the Pharisees as the religious MVPs, all right? They went to seminary, they knew all about God, and they were all about religion. And Jesus did not fit into their version of pre-approved religion. And so here's what happens next. It says, some men came carrying a paralyzed man on a sleeping mat. They tried to take him inside to Jesus, but they couldn't reach him because of the crowd. So, quick poll. Anybody remember crowds? Anybody? Crowded rooms. I always like to think about this moment like the Christiana Mall parking lot at Christmas time, circa 2019. Nobody's getting in, and nobody's getting out, right? It's like a major traffic jam. These guys are trying to get their friend to Jesus, but they can't. There's a huge crowd. And remember how Luke just told us God's healing power was strongly with Jesus this day. So these friends knew, hey, the only hope that their friend had of being healed was to get him to Jesus. So they try to go in the front door, but they can't. There's too many people there. And so I think for some of us, if this were our story, this might just be where our story ends, right? We say, hey, I know where I want to go. I know what I want to do. I know where I want to be, but I can't get there. Some of us would just let our circumstances define the outcome. And I think some of us may be doing that right now. You know, maybe we're trying to make headway in a relationship or a marriage or a friendship or a tough degree program or our finances, but it just feels like the crowd is pressing in, and the crowd sounds like an unexpected response or a failing grade or a job termination notice or a visceral reaction from a person that we thought loved us, and all of a sudden the thing that we're going for, our mission, our why, starts to get lost, and we give up because we let our circumstances define our outcome. But we're about to see that didn't happen for these guys. Not these guys, not this day. They said, all right, we can't get in the front door. We'll go up to the roof. We're up at the roof. And they took off some tiles. Then they lowered the sick man on his mat down into the crowd right in front of Jesus. Nothing was going to stop them this day. I mean, they were so clear on their why. They knew they had to get their friend to Jesus. It was the only way that he was going to be healed. So they go up to the roof, they rip some of those tiles off, and they literally put him at the feet of Jesus. And of course, Jesus has no choice but to take notice. So seeing their faith, Jesus said to the man, young man, your sins are forgiven. This is not exactly what they were going for, right? They were going for physical healing. And so I find it so interesting that these men got their friend in front of Jesus, fully expecting him to physically heal their friend, but that was not his response. Now, clearly, Jesus was moved by his faith, and I think this is so key. I think maybe some of us are trying to move the heart of God. You know, we're trying to convince God in some area. We're asking for something. We want to start something or stop something, or we want his blessing on something, and we're trying to convince God. But over and over and over in the Bible, we see that what God responds to is faith. It's not convincing. It's more faith. And so that these men had faith, but Jesus' response is not to physically heal him, it's to forgive him. And I think that's because Jesus knew and understood something that these guys didn't quite understand at the time. Maybe something that some of us don't fully understand, which is that the greatest miracle actually was not physical healing. The greatest miracle was Jesus. The greatest miracle was him. He came to this earth and he was sent by God to be here, to experience what we experienced and to feel what we felt, and then die on a cross in our place so that we could be made right in a relationship with God. And so he gave them the greatest miracle he could: salvation, being saved, being restored into a relationship with the Father. And so that's what the paralyzed man received this day. He received forgiveness. And spoiler alert, that is not all he received, all right? The story keeps going, but I think it's so interesting for this man because his faith put him at the feet of Jesus. So I want you to ask yourself today, whose faith is carrying you to the feet of Jesus? Because that's where the miracle was. That's where the healing took place. This man had no hope on his own. He was physically unable to get to Jesus. He was unable to get to hope. So thank goodness he had some friends who were selfless and purposeful and full of faith and strong. We all need some strong friends, right? Like friends who can tear the roof tiles off of a house for us. And so many of us, we are not physically paralyzed. We don't need somebody to physically lower us to the feet of Jesus, but I think we can all agree we'd all like a few friends who'd be willing to do something like that for us. And whether you believe in Jesus yet or not, and if not, that's okay. You're welcome here. This church is made for people just like you. We can all agree life gets rough, right? I'm a 90s kid. I grew up in the 90s. One of my favorite shows growing up was Boy Meets World. And something they would say all the time on Boy Meets World is life is tough, get a helmet, which is just good. That's solid advice, you know? Sometimes you need a helmet for the things that you're going through in life. Because let's just be honest. I know it's Mother's Day weekend, but can we be honest that sometimes our kids are jerks, right? Yeah, wow. That's what gets you guys awake this morning, okay? Yes, our kids are jerks. We all have those moments. Our spouses don't understand us. Our parents don't understand us. Our bosses are arrogant. Our coworkers are crazy. Our finances are a mess. We are a mess. And so when we try to deal with all of those things on our own, not to mention the bigger things in life, like our divorce and those termination papers, and our drug addiction, and our bankruptcy, when we try to deal with all of those things on our own, we're never gonna make it through this thing called life, at least not by enjoying it. We might make it, we might survive, but we're not gonna thrive. And the truth is, this is part of what this paralyzed man and his friends were discovering this day. The truth is, through Jesus Christ, we do have everything that we need, but God has given us other people so we can enjoy the process. We don't just have eternity and then we have to grit our teeth and bear it to get there. He puts other people in our lives so we can experience his faithfulness and his restoration and his healing and the best things in life. But to be honest, you know, for me, I've had times where I have viewed friendship as a nice to have instead of a need to have. And some of you can probably relate to that. Like, I'm a very driven person. I am certainly an extrovert, so I like being around people, but I don't want to need people, all right? I want to be self-sufficient. I want to be in control. If I need a miracle, I'd like to decide when I get myself to Jesus and how I get there. Thank you very much, all right? I'm like, I want to be in control here, but what I am starting to learn is that God did not design us to go through life alone. And he didn't design us to just go through life with us and God. If you start to read more about Jesus' life, you realize he was surrounded by other people. He had 12 friends. He had 12 disciples that were around him all the time, and he was the Son of God. And so if he needed other people, chances are we do too. That's how God designed us. One of the earliest believers who had had a powerful experience with Jesus put it this way: share each other's burdens, and in this way, obey the law of Christ. These friends and this man who was paralyzed, they knew something about sharing. They were willing to share each other's burdens. And I have a lot of experience, at least with this word sharing, because I am a mom of a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old. So I feel like I am often asking them to share. I start to hear them in the next room. I'm in the kitchen, and I start to hear, you can kind of tell they're fighting over something. And so I'm always like, okay, guys, you need to share. You need to share. Hey, mommy is talking to you. I said, guys, you need to share. And then eventually, by about the 5th time, I am like, Luca, if you do not share that toy with your brother right now, you are not watching TV today. Do you understand me? And now everybody is upset. And I've punished myself, because we all know the 30 minutes he was going to spend watching Daniel Tiger. He's now going to be beside me, whining that he's not watching Daniel Tiger. And the whole thing is a mess, right? The whole thing is a mess. I'm working on patience as a mom. I have a lot of work to do, all right? So I'm trying to teach them about sharing. And why am I trying to teach them about sharing? Well, because sharing is mutual and it connects. You know that? That's what sharing does. It connects. It builds trust. It develops relationship, but it also requires some vulnerability. And now, sharing as a kid is a lot easier than sharing as an adult. When we're kids and we get to share a toy, worst case scenario is that we won't get the toy back or that we get punished. But I think as we start to get older, as we become teenagers and young adults and then adults, we realize that the stakes for sharing get higher and higher and higher. And so when we start to share what's really going on in our lives, not just our dreams, but our fears and our sins and the thing we shouldn't have said, but we said it anyways. The thing that we shouldn't have done, but we done it anyways. What happens is that we open ourselves up to the very real possibility that we'll be embarrassed, that we'll be judged, that we'll be condemned. And so what do many of us do? We just decide it's not worth it. It's not worth, the stakes are too high. Sharing is not worth it. But here's what the writer of this knew, and here's what I'm starting to discover, is that if we refuse to share, then we refuse to open ourselves up to the possibility that through sharing we can be understood, we can be heard, we can be healed. Did you know that the Bible tells us that we receive forgiveness from God, but that we can only receive healing from other people? There's a process there. There's a flow there. I think some of us are banging our heads against the wall because we are devoted followers of Jesus, and we're coming to God and we're confessing what's going on in our lives, but then we're all up in our own head, and there's shame, hey, why is this thing still happening? And it's because God designed us to get that stuff out of us. He designed it to get it out of us because other people are one of God's greatest gifts to us. It doesn't always seem that way. It doesn't always feel that way, but it's one of his greatest gifts. I really believe that there are things that we cannot get through, that we cannot receive, that we cannot ask for unless that God is going to do it through other people. We've got to rely on other people. It's impossible to do this faith thing alone. And maybe for some of you, you're like, okay, that sounds nice. I still don't believe you. I get it. We're going to go back to this story and remember a couple of the characters in this story. We've got the friends, we've got the paralyzed man, we've got Jesus, we've got those Pharisees in the corner observing Jesus, and they start to hear his audacious claims about being the Son of God and forgiving sins, and it starts to get them pretty riled up, is a good way to put it, all right? So here's what happens next. The Pharisees and the teachers of religious law said to themselves, "Who does he think he is? That's blasphemy. I can't believe it. Only God can forgive sins." Jesus knew what they were thinking, so he asked them, "Why do you question this in your hearts? Is it easier to say your sins are forgiven or stand up and walk. So I will prove to you that the Son of Man, which was just another name that Jesus would call himself, has the authority on earth to forgive sins. Then Jesus turned to the paralyzed man and said, stand up, pick up your mat, and go home. This is what they came for, right? This is why those friends busted through the roof tiles to get their friend to Jesus. This man not only received forgiveness this day, but he received physical healing. And I always think he was probably so glad that the Pharisees, those old religious sticklers in the corner, were there that day to challenge Jesus, because he walked away with a miracle. And more than just being grateful for them, I think he was grateful for his friends, because remember, his friends' faith put him at the feet of Jesus. And so he left on his own 2 feet. It was a miracle. It was a miracle that happened on the mat. And there were so many ingredients of this miracle. There's the friends' faith. There's the Pharisees who challenged Jesus. And there was the fact that this man allowed himself to get on the mat in the first place. Think about this. Laying on that mat had to be the ultimate moment of humility. It was him saying, hey, there is something wrong with me. There's something wrong. I'm broken. I'm out of control. And it was his willingness to admit his weakness that allowed his friends to carry him straight to the feet of Jesus. If he was not willing to admit that something was going on, if he was not willing to get some help from his friends, he would not have experienced the miracle that God had in store for him. And I think some of us right now may be resisting getting on the mat. We're going through something in our lives. We're going through some sort of turmoil, whether it's physical or spiritual or emotional. It's a mental illness or an addiction, but we don't want to admit it. Right? What do we want? We want to be the friend who was strong enough to tear a roof tile and get his friend in front of Jesus and then reminisce about it for years and years to come at parties. We don't actually want to be the friend who had to be on the mat who needed help, right? We don't want to admit that there's something really going on in our lives. We don't want to admit brokenness. We don't want to be truly honest. What we do instead is we try to convince ourselves that it's all fine. We try to convince ourselves that this marriage or this house or this school or this friendship, that it's enough, but we sense God has more for us. We try to convince ourselves that our own tenacity, our own strength, our own independence, our own ability to control will get us where we want to be, but we've got to stop fighting it and realize that the miracle only happened on the mat. The miracle only happened when he put himself in a position to need help. That's when it happened. The miracle didn't happen, and it doesn't happen when we say I'm fine, but we're really not fine. The miracle doesn't happen when we sign up for our J group, but never actually go, right? That's not when it happens. The miracle doesn't happen when we pretend like we don't need other people. The miracle doesn't happen unless we are willing to be real, to get on the mat, to say what is wrong, what is broken, and to realize that God will meet us on that mat. But we've got to go first. We've got to take that first step. And for all of us, if we want to stand strong on our own 2 feet, and we all do, if we want to stand strong, then we need friends whose faith will carry us to the feet of Jesus. It's not a nice to have, it's a need to have, because that's the way that God designed it. And so the question is, how do we find those friends? And the answer is not easy, but it is simple. We put ourselves in positions and in places to find those friends. That's part of what our J groups are all about. That's the heart behind our group, creating an environment where we can find some of those friends. You know, I am I'm a runner. I led a running J group for years, which for some of you, that's like your worst nightmare. But for a few of you, you're like, yes, that's what I want to do, run miles and miles on a Saturday morning at 6 a.m. with other people. And so as a runner, I always like to think about these types of friends as spiritual running mates. You know, they are people who will run beside us towards the purpose that God has for us, who will encourage us along the way, push us and challenge us. There's a young man in our church, a guy named David, and he started coming to the journey. He was gathering with us online right at the very beginning of COVID, and this past summer, he decided to join his first J group, and he actually started to build relationships, because guess what? He didn't just sign up for the group, he went to the group, and then he would stay after, and he started to get to know people, and he allowed them to get to know him and ask him questions and encourage him to take next steps. And so he started serving on the team, and he got baptized last year. He led his own J group this past spring because he found some spiritual running mates to propel him into the purpose that God had for him. And so we all need some of those people, and finding good running mates can take time. I remember a few years ago, I was at a wedding, and we were sitting with a couple that we didn't know really well yet. And you know that awkward small talk you do at a wedding when you're like so hungry and you don't know why the food is not there yet, and you're just trying to like kind of get through, you know, how's the weather, where are you from? And at one point, the wife mentioned that she was a runner, and all of a sudden I was like, now I am interested. Tell me more. You know, where do you live? Is it possible that we could get together and run? How far do you run? How fast do you run? What type of shoes do you wear? Because these are all of the things that crazy runners want to know about each other. And the good news is she passed the test. She passed the test. And 5 years later, she is one of my closest friends. But it didn't happen overnight. It started to take time. We would get together. At first, we were only friends because it was convenient. I really just needed somebody to run with, right? And so she was willing to meet up. And so we'd run, and we'd have these surface level conversations. You know, how's the weather? Where are you from? What do you do? What kind of ice cream do you like? But then, like, eventually, we started asking harder questions, and we started going a little bit deeper. I remember a few months ago, we were on a run, which it's easy to be more honest when you're on a run. You don't have to look somebody in the eye, right? It's weird if you're looking them in the eye when they're running beside you. And I remember saying to her, hey, I got to tell you something that's going on that I haven't told anybody else yet. But that took years. It took years. We joke that we know we're now actually real friends because we will sometimes hang out outside of running. But it took 4.5 years to get to that point. And I think for all of us, we need friends like that. We need friends that are more than just people we can call. We need friends who are going to care about us, friends who will carry us. Now, I know for some of you guys, you don't like that visual of another guy carrying you, right? I get it. So think about it as like friends who will throw down for you, okay? Friends who will just tear the roof tiles off for you. Those are the types of friends that we all need. But the problem is many of us, what do? We keep it surface level. We keep it up here. We stick with having a few friends that we can call when we need to borrow a tool to refinish our deck, or we just need advice on getting this baby to sleep, or we need help with this Algebra 2 test that we have coming up. But we eventually have to move from having friends that we can call to having friends who care about us, having friends who will carry us through, friends who will encourage, friends who will help us find healing, friends who help us grow. And that's who these friends were to that man that day. And this is how the story ends. Immediately, as everyone watched, the man jumped up, picked up his mat, and went home praising God. Everyone was gripped with great wonder and awe, and they praised God, exclaiming, "We have seen amazing things today." Did you notice his first response? He had to tell other people. He didn't keep, the miracle happened on the mat, but he wasn't going to keep the miracle to himself. He had to tell other people. And I've had moments, you know, we talked a little bit about that friendship thing and being driven, and I've had some moments of just struggling through friendships. I remember a few years ago, I was driving home on 95, which is always when you need God the most. And I don't even remember what had happened or what had kind of triggered it, but I remember just being so frustrated and just honestly, I wasn't praying. I was just complaining to God. I was like, God, I don't understand why I don't have some of these people in my life. I feel like I'm pouring out. I feel like I am constantly surrounded by people, but I'm still so alone. Where are these people? How do I find them? What's wrong with me? Why don't I have them? And I remember hearing the voice of God so clearly. And he just said to me, if you want to find the kind of friends that you're asking me for, then you got to start by becoming that friend. You go first, which is not what I wanted to hear. I was like, I want somebody else to go first. But God said, you go first. And I think God says that to us a lot, because this is what God goes first. God loved us first. God saved us first. God wasn't waiting for us. God came to us. And so God is asking us to go first. If you want somebody to carry your mat, then you got to start by becoming the type of person who carries somebody else's mat. You've got to go first. You say the thing. You ask the question. You join the team. You go first. You go first. You lead the J group. Stop waiting for somebody else to lead the type of group that you always say that you want to join, and you lead the group. Because you go first. You don't have to have it all together. As a matter of fact, it's better if you don't. Because people don't need a perfect version of you. They need a real version of you. Because they're going through the same things. You go first. You finally go and tell a friend, you know what? I am laying face down on this mat of my marriage, and I don't know if we're going to make it. You go first. You tell somebody else, I don't even know what to do, but I don't think I'm ever going to get through this depression. You go first. You go first. You finally go and tell somebody, I've been hiding this addiction for years. You go first. You pray the prayers. You believe for the miracle. You take your rope and you throw it to somebody else who's going through a dark time, and you pull them not closer to you, but closer to Jesus. You go first. If you want these types of friends, then you start by becoming this type of friend. You go first. And you want to know what happens when you go first? God blesses it, because that's what he does. God is a God of invitation. And God is a God who is willing to pour out if he knows the people, the vessels he's pouring into are going to pour out for other people. He'll keep pouring and pouring and pouring if you will. He will give you more than you could have ever asked or imagined when you say you'll go first. And if you needed that encouragement, not that reminder, that encouragement this weekend to go first, would you just raise your hand? I want to pray over you. Yeah, God, we come to you and we thank you so much that you are a God of invitation. God, this is what you do. You invite us. You beckon us into more of your grace and your mercy and opportunities to see your faithfulness. And so, God, I pray right now for all of us who maybe have struggled, God, who have legitimate hurts around this friendship thing, around times that we've shared with somebody else and have been judged, have been convicted, have been condemned. God, I pray right now that we can release that to you and that you give us the courage this week to tell somebody else, God. I pray that you give us the courage to go first. And as we all stay in this moment together, I want to encourage some of you to know that God went first. God already went first when he sent his son, Jesus. See, God knew that our sin was going to separate us from him for the rest of eternity, and he couldn't bear that. He wanted to bring us into a right relationship with him. So he sent Jesus to this earth to feel what we've felt and experience what we've experienced, and then die a painful death on a cross so that we could be brought into a right relationship with him. We don't have to do anything to earn it. We don't deserve it. It's a gift. And if you're gathering with us this morning and you've never made that decision to put your faith in Jesus once and for all. I want to invite you, make today your day. It's the greatest decision that you're ever going to make. And if that's you, I want to invite you right now to pray this prayer with me. God, here I am. Here I am. Thank you for going first. I'm done trying to live life on my own. I'm done trying to do it my way, and I pray I can do it your way. Right now, in the name of Jesus, I put my faith in Jesus. I make him leader and Lord of my life. And right now, while we're still in this moment, while people still have their eyes closed, if you made that decision, would you just slip up your hand? Yeah, if you're online and you're making that decision right now, you can just type faith in the comments. We believe that's the most important decision that you're ever going to make. You guys can put your hands down, and can you help me give it up one more time for Jesus in this place?